This video is sponsored by Classic Football Shirts, the best place to get your classic and vintage football shirts. To get cheap retro Palace shirts, click the link in the description below. Hello and welcome to the Crystal Palace podcast. I'm Alfonso Greenbrook, and in today's podcast I'll be looking over the result against Man United by bringing you my match review, player rankings and my man of the match. As well as this, I'm also going to bring you an exclusive interview with Hodgson, Freddie Ladapo and Damien Delaney after the game. So let's begin. It was the second miserable weekend in Manchester in succession for Crystal Palace, as they fell to another heavy defeat, this time at the hands of Manchester United at Old Trafford. Roy Hodgson's team's wait for their first Premier League point and goal stretches into its 8th game after this latest defeat, with an early Juan Mata goal, a brace from Marouane Fellaini and a Romelu Lukaku tapping condemning the Eagles to a 7th straight league loss of the campaign. Once again this season, a poor start left Palace on the back foot as only 2 minutes had elapsed before United netted their first. Ashley Young fed the ball down the left channel for Marcus Rashford, who took the ball inside before switching it onto his left foot to beat Joe Ward. The teenager then drove to the byline before centering for Mata, who had the simple task of side-footing home from 8 yards out. There was a glimmer of an opportunity for the Eagles to finally end their long await for a goal in league action soon after, when Ward won a free kick just outside the area which Andros Townsend swung into the area, but Mamadou Sakho nodded just over the top. However, after surviving Nemanja Matic's off-target attempt following a sustained period of United possession, Hodgson's team slowly began to impose themselves, and after showing promising signs in the form of a few corners, they had their first shot on target around the half-an-hour mark via a trademark blast from Bakary Sakho, which required being beaten away by David De Gea. But the good work was undone 4 minutes later when Jose Mourinho's side doubled their lead. And again it came via the left flank, with Young teasing his way past Andros Townsend before whipping in a delightful cross towards the back post, where Fellaini was on hand to dispatch it past Wayne Hennessy from close range. The home side smelt blood and had chances to add a third before the break, when Chris Smalling headed a corner wide. Hennessy made a smart stop to save a low-driven effort by Rashford, and Henrik Mkhitaryan volleyed into the Stretford end before half-time. But following the restart, once again Palace was slow out of the blocks and were punished. United won a free kick just outside the area, which Rashford whipped into the box with venom, and it looked to be heading in itself before Fellaini got the faintest of touches on it from a couple yards out to claim his second and end the match as a contest. With the chance of a first Premier League point of the season all but gone, the only consolation Palace could take from the remaining 41 minutes was to try and finally get on the scoresheet, and they had a few glimmers of hope when Sakho was harshly denied a penalty, Jeffrey Slupp miscued a diving header, and Yohan Cabaye blazed high and wide. 10 hours of top-flight football this term without a goal would pass before the Eagles' best opportunity of the game came, when Sakho screwed over from 6 yards out after a Ward cutback. But looking to continue his record of scoring in his first 7 league games for his new side, Lukaku wriggled free inside the box and skimmed the base of the post as United continued to look goal-hungry. With 15 minutes to go, Freddie Ladapo was handed a Palace debut in an effort to end the goal drought, and he nearly did that via an Andros Townsend free kick which flashed wide of De Gea's far post. But Mourinho's men continued to be the far more potent in attack, and Hennessy stayed big to deny Anthony Martial's effort after he was played through by Ander Herrera. However, salt was rubbed into the wound with 5 minutes remaining when Lukaku finally got his now customary goal. He started the move by winning the ball in the air and finding Herrera, and once again he played in Martial, who this time centred for the big money summer signing to simply stroke home into an unguarded net and complete another miserable afternoon for Palace. It was not the shock result Crystal Palace fans would have been hoping for at Old Trafford, as the Eagles lost 4-0 against an informed Manchester United side. Palace were well beaten on the day as United coasted to victory, with Jose Mourinho's side winning by a 4-goal margin for the 3rd time in 4 home matches in the Premier League so far this season. But what do we learn from the game? Here are 5 things. Number 1. Palace's lack of squad depth. It was already known that Palace was short of strikers after the summer transfer window, but the injury to Christian Benteke has simply highlighted that fact even more. With no other recognised striker with Premier League experience, Roy Hodgson turned to former Wolves winger Bakary Sakho up top, and he worked hard in an unfamiliar role, but rarely threatened a stubborn United defence. Mourinho's men had already kept 5 clean sheets in 6 games going into this one, and facing a Palace side short of strikers and still searching for their first goal of the campaign, it was little surprise that they had 6 clean sheets in 7. However, the defeat echoed the fact that Palace need players back fit soon, and the return of Wilfried Zaha cannot come quick enough for the Eagles. Number 2, a bright lad. There weren't many positives for Crystal Palace to take away from Manchester, but a Premier League debut for Freddie Ladapo was a bright spot for the Eagles. The former Margate man was introduced as a second half substitution for his first competitive appearance for Palace, having been plucked from non-league in 2016. He's been involved in a matchday squad before and has featured in pre-season with the first team, but never before has he made it on the pitch in a competitive fixture for Palace. But now that has changed, and he may now get more opportunities in the next few weeks with Palace's striker problems. Number 3, another terrible start. Not for the first time this season, Palace started a game by conceding an early goal. It has happened already against Burnley and Southampton, and it happened again at Old Trafford, with Juan Mata's early goal putting the Eagles on the back foot after less than 3 minutes. Against a team in form like United, that was the last thing Palace would have wanted, and it gave them a hill to climb early on. To their credit, Palace didn't fold and battled on and grew into the game, but if they could have just stayed firm in the early stages, who knows what could have been. Number 4, Palace's broken records. Roy Hodgson said that he knew the size of the task when he took the job, but there is no doubt that he's got a tough job on his hands to turn things around at Palace. Palace are now only the second team to lose their opening 7 games in the Premier League season, after Portsmouth in 2009-10 season, although the Eagles are the first to do it without scoring a goal. They remain the only side in the top 5 European leagues, England, France, Germany, Italy and Spain, not to score a goal yet this season. And in failing to beat Manchester United again, it is now a record sequence for the most games without a goal to a single opponent in the Premier League, with that number now standing at 17. And number 5, sing a song for the Palace fans. Given the Eagles' current plight, with 6 defeats in the spin and only having scored a goal in 1 of their last 11 Premier League matches, it was some effort for Palace to sell out the away end at Old Trafford. And not only that, the Palace supporters sang loudly throughout, often out-singing the United fans despite the scoreline. The fans have had precious little to cheer about so far this season, but still turned up in their droves to see their struggling side and give them their backing. The Eagles may not be winning on the pitch, but their fans are certainly showing that they are keeping the faith. So now I'm going to move on to the player ratings, but before I do that, don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Facebook at @Palace for all the latest Palace news. And also, if you're on Facebook, do feel free to join our Facebook group, which is a really great place for you to join in with discussion with other fans, also share your opinion with other fans who are on the group, and also is a great place for you to post images and videos from the game, so that people who didn't go to the game or don't sit in the same seats as you can get a feel from what you thought about the game. And also, you know, you don't necessarily have to just join in with discussions. If there's something, a news article which stands out for you, which you want to share with other fans, then of course do also go on the Facebook group, because, you know, that's what it's there for you to share your opinion, any news with other Palace fans. Now, another great place to share your opinion is in the YouTube comments. So if you are listening to the podcast on YouTube, then do drop a comment below the video with your player ratings, rating the players from 1 to 10, with 10 being the best and 1 being the worst, and that's sort of how you thought the players performed throughout the game. And also, if you don't necessarily want to do that, then just drop your views in the comments section below, your views about the game, so that if I go back to the video and see, you know, what you guys in the comment section say, I can read through it and see what your opinion is. But also, any other fans who come and listen to the podcast, watch the video, they can also read the comments and see what other fans had to say. And it's really good, especially things like forums and Facebook groups. If we do that in YouTube comments where there's a lot of discussion, it does make for quite an interesting comment section, because I personally do also like reading what other fans had to say. Now, of course, if you do want to find any of these social media groups, then all the links will be in the description below. But now I'm going to move on to the player rating, starting in goal with Wayne Hennessy, who I am going to give a 5. Could do nothing about the opening 2 goals, but should have commanded his area better for the third, with Fellaini being able to head home from close range. So Wayne Hennessy here, I've given him a 5, and even though we did concede 4 goals, he wasn't the main culprit in the game. And that's not to say that I'm not putting any blame on Hennessy for the 4 goals we conceded. But like I said in that little introduction there, the opening 2 goals, obviously the first one's mainly Joe Ward's fault for the fact that he, let Rashford put the cross in, and the fact that PVA was ball watching and didn't track Mata. So in that respect, the first goal had nothing to do with it. And then the second goal, that was a headed one. Hennessy couldn't really do much about that because at the end of the day, the defenders need to be the ones marking. So the first 2 goals in the first half, I'm not really going to put too much blame on Hennessy, so that's why I've given him a 5. But in the second half, especially with the third goal, he definitely should have been doing better. And if you look at the second goal that Fellaini did score, literally it was a header from the penalty spot. So Hennessy should have been commanding his area. So as soon as Rashford puts that ball in from the free kick, Hennessy should have been there. Doesn't matter if, Fellaini's in the way, he should have punched the ball away. He should have at least tried to grab the ball, because what he did, he stayed on his line. He was like 2 foot off his line. Fellaini was at the penalty spot, and it was an easy header for Fellaini because he was so close range, and the fact that Hennessy was off his line, there was no way he was going to save that. So in that respect, with the third goal, he should have been commanding his side better, so he should have been putting his hands through it, or at least trying to grab and punch that ball away. Obviously he didn't. He should have been trying to call. That's the thing with Hennessy. When you see him playing with Wales, he's always communicating with the defenders. But for some reason, when he plays for Palace, he loses that commandment, and then the whole team sort of loses confidence because, the goalkeeper is at the back. But in this game, third goal, definitely, considering how close it was to the goal, the fact that it was almost on the penalty spot, Hennessy should have been doing better with that one. Whether it would be taking a few steps back and actually making a save on the line, which really that's the second option. He should have been doing the first option, which is going forth and actually claiming the ball. And then the third goal, which Lukaku's got, Lukaku, simple ball from Martial, tapped it into an open goal. I can't really blame Hennessy too much for that, but he thinks that he's going to go to his far post, so he's gone to that side, and then Lukaku's just put it in the opposite side. So I can't really blame Hennessy too much for that goal. But once again, it's that commandment. It's the fact that he wasn't marshalling the defenders in front of him. If he had that communication, he would have made sure that there was a player man marking Lukaku. He would make sure that there was a player drifting to the left-hand side to cover that area. But once again, that lack of communication, the lack of sort of skill and confidence in the side at the minute meant that Hennessy was wrong-footed for that goal, and also the fact that there was no defenders there. So when the ball came from the byline from Martial, Lukaku was able to tap home. But Hennessy, yes, I could blame him for 2 of the goals and not so much on the first goals. Overall, it was quite a disappointing performance, and that's why I've given him the 5. But quite a lot of players this weekend, I gave them 4s. And the only reason I gave Hennessy a 5 is there was 1 or 2 really great saves he did make. And if them goals had gone in, it would have been another Manchester City where we lost 5, maybe even 6-0. But Hennessy, you've got to give him credits, because for all the mistakes he makes, he does sometimes make saves which keep us in the game. And in this game, as an example, he made 1 or 2 great saves. I think one from, I can't believe, Mata maybe in the first half. No, I think it was from Matic in the first half. He made a save from Matic, and that's what he done. He made himself big. So I don't see why he couldn't do that with every other situation, because there's times where he's one-on-one, he makes really great save, but then there's other times where his decision making is letting us down again. But I've listened to whole radio, they brought up a really good point saying, we're not going to get anything from Chelsea, we're not expecting anything, so why not throw Speroni in there? Because Wayne Hennessy looks bereaved of confidence at the minute. Throw in Speroni there, at least he would command his box, at least he would play with the passion and actually do everything for the team, whether it be him getting injured. He would make sure he would make that claim for the ball, or he would make that punch. So maybe in that instance, maybe Hennessy needs to be dropped, not only because he's playing badly, but also just the confidence in the team. And if you bring someone like Speroni in, a club legend, hopefully that will sort of instill some more confidence, not only in the goalkeeper himself, but also in the back line which is in front of him. But a 5 for Hennessy, I think, is a fair result. Obviously, moving on now to the right back Joe Ward, who I am going to give a 4. Was beaten far too easily by Marcus Rashford down the left for the opening goal, and endured a difficult first 45 minutes against the England man. Did better in the second half and made a fine block to deny Rashford. So Joe Ward here, and I've given him a 4, and like I talked about with Wayne Hennessy, there's going to be a few players who I've given 4s because we lost 4-0 and it was a really disappointing performance. And the fact that we conceded within the first 3 minutes, you could purely put that down to Joe Ward, and it's not all of his fault, but the main thing of it was his fault. The fact that as a fullback, you need to be making sure you're marking your man who's playing on the wing. You need to make sure that you stop the crosses going in. That is the main role of someone playing as a left or right back. But in this game, Marcus Rashford, yes, he's a really skillful player. He's got loads of pace. But Joe Ward let him go past him far too easily. You know, Marcus Rashford ran into the byline, ran back again, then turned Joe Ward far too easily. And obviously Marcus Rashford ran through to the byline again, put a cross in, and Mata was able to score. So for the opening goal within the first 3 minutes, if Joe Ward had done his job as a right back and actually made the block to stop the cross coming in, or at least staying with his man and not getting, you know, done on the wing, maybe, you know, we wouldn't have scored that first goal. And considering after the goal we played quite well, imagine if it was still 0-0 at that point and we started having those shots on goal, maybe that would have instilled a little bit more confidence in the side. But the fact that one player made a mistake which led to us conceding the first goal because he let the cross come in, that sort of set the tone for the rest of the game, to be honest. And considering how fast Marcus Rashford was, other than that cross in the first half, he completely dominated Joe Ward. Joe Ward found it really, really difficult to defend against him because Ward hasn't got the pace, hasn't got that flexibility that Rashford had. So the England man, we know how good Rashford is, but in this game he showed his class once again. Now, obviously in the second half, he did improve slightly, as did the rest of the team, but sort of that fatigue started kicking in, the physicality that Man United had that we didn't have, that all started to come in the second half, and we started to see more lacklustre performance from the team. So we were playing badly already, but it got even worse after that. But Joe Ward was one of the players who had a slightly better second half, and he still made a block to deny Rashford, so he learnt from his mistake in the first half. So by making sure he actually done his job properly and marked Marcus Rashford to make sure that he could deny him any goal scoring chances. But, you know, Joe Ward here, I know obviously he's had a really difficult last sort of year, last sort of 12 months. He's really been declining in form, and the only reason he played this game is because Fosu-Mensah couldn't play against Man United, as that's his parent loan club. So, you know, Fosu-Mensah comes in after the international break. Joe Ward won't be in the side again, and that will strengthen us once again, because I personally think, obviously this was a weak side as a whole, but Joe Ward, once again, like he's been for the whole of this season, he was once again the weak link in the team. But just, you know, before I go on to talk about the next player, I'll just talk a little bit more about the first goal, because I did say it was mainly down to Joe Ward's fault, and yes, that may be true. But if we look back at the goal in slow motion, obviously Joe Ward's got beaten on the left flank, so Rashford has got past him, got to the byline, put the cross into Mata, who's obviously went on to score the goal. As he's done that, Sakho, obviously being as intelligent as he is, he's thought, well, I've seen Marcus Rashford here, I need to go to him. So Marcus Rashford had drawn his man in Sakho to you know, try and stop Rashford from going any further, which is the right thing to do. You know, defensively, that is the correct thing to do. If a player runs through on goal from, say, a player like Joe Ward getting beaten, then you go to him. So that's fine. Sakho's done the right thing. But then the likes of Van Aanholt and Delaney, they've also, you know, been ball watching, and they drifted. But they drifted so much that it meant that, you know, Van Aanholt was watching. He was literally by Mata, but he was watching him, and the ball went in. And then Delaney as well, he couldn't really do anything about it because he was so far back. He wasn't marking the man, Mata, who scored the goal. He was free on the edge of the area. No one was marking him, and it was an easy tap in home for Mata to score. So if you look back at that goal, yes, most of it, the majority of it, maybe 70% of it, is Joe Ward's fault for getting beaten far too easily. But then if we look back at it again, Delaney should have been, you know, closer to his man, and Van Aanholt, instead of ball watching, should have been on Mata as soon as he got the ball to stop him having that shot on goal. But like I said, I'll go on to talk about Sakho later. But in terms of that first goal, I think you've got to put the blame on Joe Ward for letting that cross go in, and Delaney and Van Aanholt for ball watching and not doing too much to stop the chance. Now I'm going to move on to the centre-back, Damien Delaney, who I am going to give a 5. Didn't do too much wrong and kept Lukaku at bay for the most part, and was willing to put his body on the line to make some crucial challenges. So Damien Delaney here, he hasn't really played for the first team in the Premier League for quite a few months now. And to be honest, considering it's his first game and he's only played about 30 minutes against Huddersfield in the League Cup a few weeks ago, I thought he'd done a pretty decent job. And I personally, when I saw the lineups come out before the game, I thought this is going to be bad. We've got Delaney at the back, we've got Puncheon back into the side. I thought this is going to be a really, really bad game. You know, we've got players who are out of form, haven't played in a while, and I thought we're probably going to get beaten 4-0 because I thought this is a really, really weak side that we're putting out. But to be honest, Damien Delaney, out of the whole defence, was probably one of the better defensive players, because I've already mentioned, yes, you could put a little bit of blame on him for the first goal, but the majority of that's on Joe Ward. If you put that aside, I don't think there was too much wrong with the way Delaney played. You know, if you look back at the Chelsea game a few seasons ago, him versus Diego Costa, that was a really great battle, and Delaney came up on top. You know, Lukaku's in that sort of position now where he's one of the informed strikers in the Premier League, and still Damien Delaney, I think at the age of 36, still was able to keep him quiet for the most part. And if you look at the game as a whole, there were a few chances that Lukaku had, that Rashford had, where actually Damien Delaney, you know, with him being so hard as he is and having that determination, he'd put his body on the line, and that's something our defenders haven't done in the last few weeks. So unlike Man City last weekend where we just fell apart, at least in this game, you know, players were actually trying and putting in the effort, and Delaney was one of them players who didn't come into the game with many fans expecting him to play well, but actually was probably one of the better players throughout the game, and that's certainly probably down to his crucial challenges, because, you know, even though it was only 1 or 2 of them, if he hadn't have made them challenges where he put his body on the line, tried to do everything for the team, then maybe we could have lost by maybe 5, maybe 6 goals. So in that respect, I don't think he done too much wrong. But the fact that Lukaku ended up scoring because, you know, the defence fell asleep and it was a lapse in concentration, that's the reason that I've given him a 5. Because even though, like I said, he's only just come back into the side, I thought he put himself about a bit. But based on this performance and the fact that he's now the 8th choice centre-back, we can see now that he's coming to the end of his career, probably retire at the end of this season. But we can just see that maybe he's not really as good as he used to be. But still, when called upon, he can, you know, put in a shift. But like I've said already, 8th choice centre-back. The only reason he did play this game is because we had injuries to Scott Dan and James Tompkins. So if them 2 players do come back, there's no way that Mamadou Sakho will get into the side. But like I've said already, a 5 for him, a really fair result. Like I said, considering he hasn't played much this season, neither did he at the end of last season. But still, you know, put his body on the line and did keep Lukaku quiet for the most part throughout the game. Obviously, moving on now to his centre-back partner, Mamadou Sakho, who I'm going to give a 5. Made a good defensive clearance from a Rashford cross, but otherwise didn't have his best game, and the defender has been questioned for giving Lukaku too much space for the 4th goal. So Mamadou Sakho here, much like Damien Delaney, I've given him a 5 because there was a few good sort of chances that he put in blocks and crucial challenges throughout the game, and there was one in particular from Rashford. We obviously know how good he was in this game. Rashford put in a cross and Sakho made a really good clearance. So that in particular is what Sakho done really well. But the reason I've given him a 5 is that overall, other than stopping that Rashford cross, he didn't really have his best game. And considering how well we've seen him play, you know, last season and how well he did for us in keeping us up, we could expect big things from him. But like I said last week, against Man United, against Man City, these are really, really big games to come back into the side. And considering he hasn't played because he's had injury, you're not really going to expect too much from him. So in this game, we did see his class in little glimpses. You know, the fact that he made that clearance from Rashford. But, you know, he's still being questioned. And I personally think I'm not going to sort of make any excuses for him because it was not the greatest performance. But he is just coming back from injury. So maybe after the international break where he gets 100% fit, after having that knee injury, hopefully after that he can restart his Palace career properly and get back hitting the ground running. But like I've said, as much as I can give credit to him for how well he done last season and how he's done alright in spells this season, you still got to question him for the Lukaku's goal. So I already said about the 4th goal where the defence fell asleep and there was a lapse of concentration. Mamadou Sakho, we know how good his footballing brain was, or still is, but you know, in that situation, he gave Lukaku far too much space. So Delaney and Sakho, little bits of lapse of concentration, and it let Lukaku get through. Because if you look back at the goal, Martial got to the byline, put the cross in, and it was literally a tap-in for Lukaku. So what the players need to be doing is not necessarily playing for their zone or their position, should be looking at the players around them. So should be man-marking Lukaku. So in that respect, that was one thing, you know, I can criticise Sakho for giving Lukaku too much space. But overall, when you're playing against a team as good as Man United and you're not in the greatest of form, and the fact that, you know, you're still coming back from injury, you can't really expect 100% brilliant performance from Sakho. But in glimpses, like I've said already, he did do well, but overall, other than that stopping up Rashford cross, he had a really disappointing performance. But a 5 for him, I think, is a really fair result, and hopefully, I've mentioned this quite a lot, you know, hopefully over the international break he can regain his fitness and then come back for the Chelsea game and play like he did against Chelsea last season, where he puts his body on the line, gives 100% to the team, because he's the sort of quality play we need to step up now. So hopefully that sort of international break where he isn't playing for his country, that can give him a little bit of a confidence boost, a little bit more of a fitness boost, and hopefully against Chelsea, against Newcastle, against West Ham, in the games coming up, he can come back 100% fit and hopefully make an impact like we know he can do from seeing him play last season. Obviously, moving on now to the left back, Patrick Van Aanholt, who I am going to give a 5. Struggled to get in the game as most of United's play came down the other wing. So Patrick Van Aanholt here, I've given him a 5, and there isn't really much to say about his performance, and that's not necessarily because he played terribly, and I'll go on to talk about the bad thing he did, but he did struggle to get into the game, and that's mainly because United, being as intelligent as they are, they knew that Joe Ward was the weak spot in the side, hence why 2 or 3 of the goals we conceded came from that side. So they kept attacking Joe Ward because they knew he was a weak link, and that meant that Van Aanholt did actually struggle to get into the game, and that's not because, you know, he was missing in the game and he wasn't getting involved. It's purely because when United had the ball, they had it on the other side of the pitch, meaning that if an interception was made, Van Aanholt wasn't really able to get on the end of that, purely because he wasn't played on his side of the pitch. But he did struggle to get into the game, and we know how good he can be. You know, we've seen glimpses last season of the quality he's got defensively and going forward, but in the last few games he hasn't really performed that well. But defensively in this game, you know, he was terrible. Well, he wasn't terrible, like I've said. Most of the attacks came down the other side, but there was one in particular, one goal, the first goal we conceded, which was really terrible from his perspective. So I've already talked about Rashford getting to the byline past Joe Ward, putting the cross in. Mamadou Sakho's been glided out to try and stop Rashford, leaving Delaney and Van Aanholt there. So Delaney, obviously being quite slow, he wasn't able to get to Mata, but if you look back at Van Aanholt, that's one thing we've got to really criticise him for, is the fact that he was ball watching. So we could see Mata in space running in, so instead of trying to intercept the ball, or at least, you know, give a little bit of a shove to sort of hook the ball away from Mata, he just stood there and watched the ball. So in that respect, defensively, you've got to be man marking your man, making sure no striker, no midfielder has got space in your box, and stop him from creating that chance. But because we didn't, because Van Aanholt was ball watching and Delaney wasn't able to get there, it meant that he made it easy for Juan Mata. If he had been there, even if we did concede a goal, if Van Aanholt was there and actually tried to put in the effort to try and block it rather than watching it, then maybe we could say more great things about his performance. But like I've said, really did struggle to get in the game. And there was one thing that I gave him, you know, credit for last weekend against Man United and Man City, was the fact that he was trying to get forward and supply Jeffrey Schlupp. They were doing some nice link-up play, 1-2s. But in this game, obviously the plan was to sit deep. Because we played so deep at times, it meant that Van Aanholt, on the rare occasion we went to go forward, because the ball wasn't really played on our side, we couldn't really see the full impact of his attacking you know, qualities. But overall, a 5 for him, I think, is a fair result. Obviously, moving on now to the midfield, starting with Luka Milivojevic, who I am going to give a 5. Tried hard in the midfield, but he couldn't really have much of an impact on the game. So Luka here, I've given him a 5, and much like the game last weekend, he did try his best in the midfield, tried to make things happen, but to be honest, because of how dominant Man United were, and the fact that Man United had most of the possession, he really did struggle to have any impact on the game, and you can't really blame him, like Van Aanholt, for not really having that much impact and not being in the game, and that's purely because of how good United were. But in terms of his defensive performance, I thought he put himself about a bit, so he was making tackles, making challenges, being that player to shield the back four. I thought he'd done that reasonably well, because if you look at the goals, most of them have come from fullbacks or, you know, centre-back errors, so you can't really blame him for any of them goals conceded. So in terms of defensively, he wasn't fantastic, but he's still done an alright job, I suppose, of breaking up the play. But in terms of his, you know, attacking intent, you know, we know he's a really defensive player, likes to sit deep, But in terms of spreading the ball, so picking up the ball from deep and putting these lovely crossfield passes to create counter-attacks and putting the ball out wide, he done that really well throughout the game. And if you look back at the game, there was a few times, this is something that we've seen from Riedewald this season, he likes to pick up the ball from deep, put these fantastic passes forward to start up the attacks. Now obviously in front of goal, how good United are defensively, you know, we weren't going to score from any of them chances. But the fact that Milivojevic can pick up that ball from deep, drive forward and actually try and create something with that chance rather than doing a punch-in and passing it back. The fact that he can find that pass and it's probably 90% of the time really accurate, it is really good. And that's why I've given him a 5 as opposed to a 4, because I thought that although he wasn't fantastic, defensively he'd done alright, you know, putting in challenges, but also offensively starting up attacks, and the fact that he's got that passing range is fantastic as well. But I think a 5 for him, not really much more to say about his performance, but I think that's a fair result. Obviously moving on now to his midfield partner Yohan Cabaye, who I am going to give a 5. Grew into the game after a slow start and tried to get forward, but he tired as the game wore on. So Yohan Cabaye here, I've given him a 5, and it's quite a lot of what I'm going to say is probably quite similar to Milivojevic's, in the fact that although he didn't have that much impact on the game, as the game went on he did slowly get more involved and try to set up you know, chances on the counter attack and try to get involved by getting on the end of crosses, but overall didn't really have that much, you know, that many chances. And with Milivojevic playing as deep as he was, it meant that Cabaye had them chances to go forward. And if you look back at the game, he certainly did try to go forward. But as you know, people say his legs are going. I don't necessarily think his legs are going. I think that he's one of these players who is really low on confidence at the minute. But as the game wore on, he started to tire, so he started to have less impact. And obviously, I believe he got taken off towards the end of the game. So no, he stayed on towards the end of the game, sorry. So that just showed that if you had taken him off, maybe that would have given us a bit more oomph in the midfield. But instead, the player I'm going to talk about later, Puncheon went off. But I think that Cabaye, actually, he should have gone off because he had an alright game, put himself a bit out, but he's still tired as the game went on. And really, you know, with him sort of partnering Milivojevic, because we were playing so deep, he didn't really have that many chances going forward, and that's why he did struggle to get into the game. But in terms of, you know, going forward, there was a few chances where he'd pick up the ball at the edge of the area, have a shot. Most of them went over the top. There was a chance as well where he got the ball in the box, had a shot, it went wide. There was another one where Bakary Sakho obviously received the ball from Milivojevic, I believe. Sakho had to, you know, go out wide to find space. As he did so, he whipped the ball in to Cabaye, and I believe the ball went over from the header. So the fact that he's trying to run forward when he's not defending is great. But overall, it would have been nice to see a little bit more from Cabaye. But I personally think a 5 is a fair result, considering how slow he was to start the game, and how even though he did try and he put in the effort, he still didn't have that end product. And like I've said, people may say his legs are going, but towards the end of the game he did get slightly tired. Now to move on to the captain, Jason Puncheon, who I am going to give a 4. Back in the side, but didn't have a huge impact on the game, as Palace were largely overrun in the midfield. So Jason Puncheon here, I've given him a 4, and to be honest, considering he's come back into the side, he didn't really have that much impact on the game. And when you consider the fact that he was taken out of the side in the first place, is purely because of how badly he was performing, not only in the fact that what he was doing on the pitch, but also in terms of captaining and marshalling the side. He wasn't doing too brilliantly, so he was dropped to the side and Milivojevic brought back into the midfield, and that actually worked really well against Man City last weekend. But with the injuries and with players not being able to play, of course we had to bring Puncheon back in. And even though you'd think a player who's being dropped, the captain of the club, they would want to try and prove a point in this game, even though that how good Man United were, Puncheon coming back into the side didn't really have that impact, didn't really look to get that message across to the manager, saying actually you shouldn't have dropped me in the first place. I've actually got quality, now I'm going to perform. And in this game I've given him a 4 because he was really poor in this game. And you can understand, obviously, with him playing in the midfield and with us being overrun because of how well United were playing in the midfield, you can understand why he would struggle. But to be honest, you can understand why he struggled purely because of how well United were playing. But if you mix how well Man United play in the midfield and add that to the fact that he was playing bad anyway, you're just going to get an even worse performance. And if you compare his performance to the likes of Cabaye and Milivojevic, Yes, they were also overrun in midfield, but at least they tried and they had a little bit more quality in the game, and that's something that Puncheon was missing. You know, Puncheon is the captain. We've seen how good he can be, but in the last sort of year or so, like Ward, his performances have declined, and maybe even though he is the captain, he needs to be dropped to the bench. So hopefully, when we get these, 5 players back from injury, hopefully they can come back into the side and improve it, so that Puncheon doesn't play. And I've not got nothing against him. I think he's a great player. On his day, he could be great. He's a good leader. But in terms of playing recently, he has been really underperforming, and he's someone who brings the whole side down. But I'm not really going to complain too much about the fact that he was playing in this game, purely because of the other options, or the options we didn't have. But in terms of the bench, maybe I would have preferred Riedewald to play, because as soon as Riedewald came off the bench for Puncheon, he changed the dynamic of the game. Riedewald was looking to play it quick. He was looking to spread the balls out to the wingers. He was trying to get things going, and that's something that Puncheon couldn't do. And, even though Man United were good, Puncheon still struggled to do that. So hopefully, in the next few games, obviously with this international break, yes, hopefully it brings back the players who are injured, so hopefully they can come back in. But other than getting the players back, even if some of the players aren't back, say Loftus-Cheek, maybe Puncheon can actually come back into the side and play well, because in the last few games, especially this season and the end of last season, he wasn't performing particularly well. But this game once again just showed how his performances are declining. So I've given him a 4 purely because he's come back into the side, didn't really prove his point to Roy Hodgson about why he should be starting, and because he didn't have that much impact on the game. He was almost like, we were almost like playing with 10 men, because he was one of the players who was so quiet he might as well not have been there. But Jason Puncheon, a 4 for him. Do comment below whether you think he should remain the captain, and whether you think that he should be starting in our midfield when all our players are fit. And this is based on how good he can be on his day. Now to move on to the left winger, Jeffrey Schlupp, who I am going to give a 4. His delivery from out wide was poor on a couple of occasions, and he was taken off after a largely ineffective display. So Jeffrey Schlupp here, much like Jason Puncheon, I've given him a 4, and that's purely because of how poor he was in the game. And he was one of the players who, against Man City last weekend, although he wasn't fantastic, there was a few chances that when we did go forward, he was the one looking to create, and he was using his pace to get in behind and put balls into the box. So although he wasn't fantastic in that game, you would think coming into Man United, a similar quality side, you would expect him to sort of at least try and have a go at the United defence. But in this game, and the reason I've given him a 4 is purely because he didn't really do that. He's sort of, it was as if, obviously he was playing quite deep, but when we were going forward, it was as if he had a fear of trying to get to the byline and putting in a cross, which is something that against Man City, at least he tried to actually run into the box and use his pace to get in behind, but he didn't do that in the game against United. And in terms of his delivery, when you've got someone like Milivojevic and Johan Kabay supplying you the ball on the counter-attack, what you need to do is you see them run into the box, you need to put the ball in. But quite a lot of the time, his delivery, so when picking up the ball on the left hand side, his delivery was really, really poor. And if you look back at the game, there was a few chances that, yes, obviously there was no players in the box, but if he had at least put the ball into the box, maybe someone like Sacco or maybe Puncheon or Kabay, maybe these guys could come on the end of the cross and at least have a volley or try and head the ball in the net, so at least score a goal. The fact that he had the chances to create these goal scoring opportunities, the fact that he didn't take them purely because it wasn't the fact that he wasn't getting forward. So obviously he wasn't getting forward as he would have liked, and obviously that gives him a poor game. But add to the top of that, not getting forward, the fact that his deliveries were really, really poor. There was a few chances, yes, he didn't get forward as much as he would have liked, but there was a few chances that he just wasted them. So the few chances he did get to go forward, instead of putting the ball really accurately on someone's head, or at least putting in like a low cross, which is difficult for defenders to deal with, all he'd done was put the ball in, and quite a lot of them went out, obviously for goal kicks, or the goalkeeper did catch them. So in that respect, I've given him the 4, is because when he did have the limited opportunities to go forward, his delivery from out wide to his crossing ability was really poor. And that's why we need to get someone like Wilfried Zaha back, because his crossing ability obviously is quality as well, but it also ups this whole sort of confidence of the whole team. So someone like Andros Townsend, who on his day can be a really good crosser of the ball, bringing Zaha back into the side will, improve the whole team. But to be honest, Jeffrey Slapp, I've given him the 4, and I've already talked about, I've repeated quite a lot what I've said about his performance, but the main thing is, he had limited chances to go forward, and when he did have the chances to go forward, and he had the chances to deliver a crossing, they were really poor, and because of that poor performance, he was taken off. Obviously, it was quite an, ineffective display. He was brought into the side to be a winger, didn't really have too much impact, and then Jaïro Riedewald came on for him. Obviously, not quite a lot of time to make an impact, but what Riedewald done that Slapp didn't do is actually pick up the ball and cross the ball into the box. And even though, he was playing as a defensive midfielder, the fact that he put the balls into the box to the striker is the thing that we missed in the game. But a 4 for him, I think, is a fair result. Moving on now to the right winger, Andros Townsend, who I am going to give a 5. Tried hard, but did have lots of defensive work to do, and didn't have much impact going forward. So Andros Townsend here, much like Jeffrey Slapp, because of how well United were playing, he didn't really have that many chances to go forward. And in a game against a team as good as Man United, like we saw last week against City, going forward you're not really going to have that many chances. So what the wingers have to do, they almost play as wing backs. They have to defend, and Andros Townsend is one of these players that when we're put under pressure, he works really hard. He was one of the players who comes away from the game with the least blame, purely because of the effort he put in and the determination we saw from him to actually try and get something from the game. And I've already mentioned it, him playing as a right wing back, because he was playing in that role, he had quite a lot of defensive work to do. So because he wasn't going forward, he had to stay back, make tackles and support Joe Ward. And although on a few times, especially for the first goal we conceded, yes, on that occasion he wasn't supporting Joe Ward, but overall, if you look at the whole game, his defensive work was quite crucial. The fact that he went back, defended, made tackles and blocks. So in terms of going forward, he weren't fantastic, but he did actually stay back and actually help the team defensively. And I'm sure that, if we hadn't have made that silly mistake against City last week and we had kept that confidence as a team at half time, I'm sure we could have got something out of that game. And the same can go into this game. If we hadn't have made that little mistake, the fact that Townsend and Slapp were doing alright defensively, maybe that could have helped us to at least get a result from this game. But like I've said already, one mistake leads to the drop in confidence from the other, which means that even though Townsend is doing a really good job defensively, it doesn't actually mean anything because the damage had already been done. And to be honest, I've given him a 5 is purely because of how hard he tried, because going forward he didn't really have that much impact. Normally he likes to pick up the ball, drive forward, put crosses into the box. But unlike Jeffrey Slapp, who had a few chances and wasted them, Andros Townsend, who we know is a really good crosser of the ball, he didn't really have that many chances as he would have liked to get the ball into the box and to get going forward and have shots. And that's one thing you could say about Townsend's performance. The only times that he did get the ball into the box was from a few free kicks, and there was one in the second half where we put a lovely delivery into the box, and Freddie Ladapo, coming on for his Premier League debut, he obviously headed just wide, I believe it was. So the fact that Ladapo, coming from non-league, can get on the end of an Andros Townsend delivery, and the fact that Andros Townsend's delivery was good, shows that the quality he has got. But when we're playing on the back foot and we can't get forward and we've got that mountain to climb, it really does restrict players. And that's something with Townsend, if we're under so much pressure, he doesn't get to go forward and show the attacking qualities he's got. But once again, like I said, do comment below with what you think, but I think a 5 for him is a fair result, considering he tried hard, done defensive work, but overall offensively didn't really have the greatest game. Moving on now to the striker Bukayo Saka, who I'm going to give a 6. Worked hard up top, but was feeding off the scraps. Did test David De Gea with a low stinging drive. So Bukayo Saka here, I've given him a 6, and as you can see already, he's the highest rated player for Palace. And in the absence of Christian Benteke, we all thought things were going to collapse and we haven't really got a first team striker with Premier League experience. But up steps Bukayo Saka, played there a few times under Pardew when, at the beginning of 2 seasons ago, and he done an alright job there. We know he's got a powerful left foot. And in this game, the reason I've given him a 6 is he actually worked hard up top. And the thing that he's got on top of Benteke, yes, Benteke is a great header of the ball. He's really physical. He wins all the aerial duels. Yes, that's true. But Bukayo Saka offered us something a little bit more. And obviously, it's not ideal having a winger up top. But if you've got someone like Saka, who's very physical as well, and has got the pace to actually work hard, much like Fraser Campbell, to get in behind, that is fantastic. But to be honest, for all that hard work that he got, or that he put into the game, he was feeding off the scraps. So because we were playing so deep, we couldn't get the ball. We A, couldn't get the ball up quick enough, or B, we didn't actually have the ball to go forward anyway. But Bakary Sakho, you know, he worked hard off the ball, and unlike Benteke, where people say he's a bit static, most of the time Benteke's static because the ball didn't get up to him. In this game, we did supply the ball a little bit more, but what Sakho did, rather than waiting for the ball to be directly at his feet, he did move about a bit, use the energy to get around, use his pace, and that's something that he has on top of Benteke. The fact that he's got that flexibility, that pace to actually get him behind, move, cause the opposition defence quite a lot of problems. And although he didn't have the greatest game in terms of, you know, chances on goal, but there was one chance, hit it on his left foot, and David De Gea, it was quite a low drive, but David De Gea had to make a save, and you know, I wrote there it was a stinging drive. So once again, that powerful left foot, he had a shot on goal, and unluckily for us, nothing really came from it. But the fact that he was able to test De Gea and actually have a shot on goal against United, who are really, really good defensively this season, it is credit to him. And like I've said already, he isn't the best option up front, but at the moment he's a physical player who's got pace, who's played up front a few times in the past, and the fact that he's got quite a good left foot, you know, why not stick him up there? And yes, people have said play Freddie Ladapo. If anything, I'll drop Jeffrey Slop, play Bakary Sakho out wide because he's got the pace and that work rate, and then bring in someone, you know, into the side like Ladapo, who's a natural striker. Yes, he may not have played in the Premier League, but neither did Jamie Vardy, neither did Dwight Gale before they got to move up to the higher leagues. So maybe in the next game, personally, if the likes of, obviously Loftus-Cheek won't play against Chelsea, but if, say, like Loftus-Cheek, Wilfried Zaha don't come back from injury, then maybe Jeffrey Slop isn't really performing that well. Move Sakho out wide, because I thought he put in a few decent crosses in this game. Put Freddie Ladapo up front, because at least we've seen what he can do in the Championship. At least Ladapo's got that quality. He's a natural born striker, so he's physical, he's tall, he's quite good at headering. Not the best, but he's quite good. And the fact that he almost scored on his debut is credit to him. So maybe going forward with the injuries we've got, maybe Slop moves out, Bakary Sakho moves back out wide, and we put a natural striker. You know, sometimes it's not about having the best striker in your team. Maybe it's just about having a player there. So it doesn't matter how good Ladapo is, the fact that he's a striker and he can play there, just play him there, and if you supply the ball to him, maybe using that quality he's got from going up the leagues and experience in all different levels, maybe that could give him and give us something different going forward. But Bakary Sakho here, a makeshift striker in this game, and I think he done a pretty decent job, and that's why I've given him the 6. Obviously, moving on now to the Palace subs, starting with James McArthur, who I am going to give a 5. Tried to get forward, but the game had gone by the time he came on. Jaïro Riedewald, a 5. On for Jeffrey Slop. Didn't have too much impact after coming on. Freddie Ladapo, a 5. On for Bakary Sakho. His every touch was cheered early on as he made his senior debut, but he didn't really get any opportunities in front of goal. So the 3 substitutes here, obviously James McArthur coming on for Puncheon, Riedewald coming on for Slop, and Ladapo coming on for Sakho. You know, at that point, you know, we're losing the game 3-0. These players have got nothing to lose by coming on the pitch. And in terms of, if you look at their positioning, they're all sort of not necessarily all defensive players. So Ladapo is obviously a striker, so he came on to try and at least get us something in front of goal. Riedewald came on just to give us a little bit more of that passing accuracy and that energy in the midfield. And obviously James McArthur came on because you know he's good going forward, and we know that if you get the ball to him, he can have shots on goal and actually create opportunities going forward. But McArthur, I've given all of the subs a 5 because I thought they came on a pitch in a difficult situation and still put themselves about a bit. Obviously James McArthur, obviously playing a slightly more advanced role than say Puncheon did in this game. He did try to get forward. We know that McArthur can have a few shots, and he tried to curl one, you know, into the top corner. Didn't really have that much impact on the game. But to be honest, by the time he come on the pitch, it was already 3-0. The game had gone. But the fact that you can bring someone like him off the bench, you know, is a good thing. And personally, looking at the game, if, you know, Roy Hodgson doesn't think Riedewald's ready for Premier League football, or at least starting Premier League football, then maybe put McArthur in the side rather than Puncheon. Because at least with McArthur, you know, someone who's on his day, he's really good at shooting from outside the box, inside the box, and also he's a player with a good work ethic. Jaïro Riedewald, obviously I've given him a 5 as well, came on for Jeffrey Slop. Didn't really have too much impact after coming on, but if you look back at the game as a whole, the thing that he did bring was a bit more dynamism, to the midfield. The fact that, unlike Puncheon, he was actually picking up the ball from deep, actually putting these lovely passes out wide. And to be honest, if you look at the game changed when Riedewald came on the pitch. He added that little bit more quality to our midfield. He was looking to put balls out wide. He was looking to create chances, and that's what you really expect from a player. And obviously, all of these subs weren't going to be impact subs because the game was already dead and buried. But at least Riedewald came on and actually tried to get something from the game. And the same could be said about Freddie Ladapo. Obviously came on for the striker Bakary Sakho. And I mentioned it already. I'd rather Sakho played instead of Schlupp and played Ladapo up front. You know, we knew we were going to lose this game. There's nothing to lose by giving Ladapo his debut. And I thought, you know, even though the fans, you know, jokingly cheered every touch he had, he almost did score. Obviously, I've mentioned it already. Andros Townsend put a delivery into the box and he headed just wide. So in that respect, or he shot just wide. So that respect, he was able to get on, you know, on the end of a cross. So maybe, even though he isn't the best striker in the world, at least if you've got someone who's a born goal scorer, whatever league he's played in, if you can get someone like him who's done really well for the under-23s, put him into the side, supply balls to him like Townsend did, like Sakho looked to do when he drifted out wide. If we can do that, maybe Freddie Ladapo, even though he's an unknown quantity for the senior team, I thought maybe he could do a job for us. But to be honest, if you look at his game as a whole, other than, you know, that Andros Townsend free kick, he didn't really have that many chances in front of goal. But overall in the game, you know, it was a really disappointing result. But I'm not going to be too sad and too worried about it, purely because obviously we had 6 injuries, or 5 if you exclude long-term Connor Wickham. So we had 5 injuries to the squad, meaning we had players who hadn't played in 6 months in the side. We've got a team low on confidence, but also we're playing one of the best teams in the league, and we must not forget that. We can't get too angry about losing to Manchester City, or Man City, Man United, and if we do lose to Chelsea, we can't get too disappointed, purely because of how much quality and how good these teams are. So now I'm going to move on to the Man of the Match award. But before I do that and give you my Man of the Match, and who I thought had the biggest influence on the game, I'm now going to give you the 4 nominations I put forward for the Man of the Match award. Now, to be honest, after a 4-0 defeat, it is really hard to pick a Man of the Match award, but it is something that I do every week, to pick out 4, even if it's a really bad performance, maybe one player in particular who was the Man of the Match, the player who I thought had the biggest influence on the game. And although we did lose the game, there were spells, especially after we conceded the first goal, where we played quite well. So the 4 players I picked who I thought had the biggest influence were Luka Milivojevic, Bakary Sakho, Andros Townsend and Jaïro Riedewald. Now, just to go through why I put these players on here, and you may not agree, but if you disagree, put your comments below in the YouTube comments. But Milivojevic here, I thought he broke up play at times really well in that defensive midfield role, and he did look to carry that ball forward and put passes out wide. So in terms defensively, he was solid enough. You know, he wasn't fantastic, but he was solid enough. And then in terms of going forward, he was setting up counter-attacks and doing what you would expect a player in the midfield to do, to spread the ball out. Bakary Sakho, obviously playing up front for us, done the right job, you know, putting in loads of effort, running around, trying to get in behind, had a shot which was saved by De Gea, tried to be that physical presence up front, so a good performance from him. Andros Townsend, he is the highest rated player on WhoScored.com, but also I do agree with him being up there as one of the better performers in the game. You know, although we were playing with a back 6 at times, playing so deep, he done his defensive work really well, and other than not supporting Joe Ward for the first goal, I thought defensively he was really great. And in terms of going forward, because he was playing so deep, he didn't have them chances to go forward, but that defensive contribution in making sure we didn't lose by a higher scoreline is really, really important. And there was one chance in the second half where he put in a really nice set piece delivery, and unluckily for us, you know, Ladapo couldn't quite connect with it. So defensively he was alright, offensively not so much, but from the few set pieces he had, he was alright. And then Jaïro Riedewald, this is one I just threw in there because I wanted to put 4 as opposed to these 3. And the only reason I put him on there is, as soon as he came off the bench, he rejuvenated our midfield, and we automatically, all of a sudden, played better because we had a more experienced, more quality player in that midfield who could pick up the ball like Luka was doing, spread it out wide, someone who could start up attacks whilst also being really solid defensively. And, you know, I personally think that given our injuries, Puncheon shouldn't have been starting, and Riedewald should have been in there because he's young. He's got that quality going forward. Defensively, he was alright. And when, like I said, when he came on, he totally changed the course of the game. But in terms of who I thought the man of the match was, it is really hard to pick one. And I don't really want to pick one because I thought, as a whole, our performance was really quite disappointing. But in terms of at least trying throughout the game and at least, you know, putting in a position that he doesn't know quite well, I am going to give it to Bakary Saka. So congratulations, Bakary. You don't win a trophy or certificate, but you do get my sincere congratulations on what was an alright performance from you. You know, it wasn't the best performance from a striker that we've seen you play, but in terms of coming into the squad where we've got no striker and at least putting in the shift and putting in the effort and being quite mobile in that role, I thought you deserve that award. But like I said already, do comment below with whether you agree with the 4 plays, and if there was one that you think I missed out, then comment that also down below. So now you've heard my match report, player rankings and my man of the match. That concludes this week's podcast. Now I've got an exclusive interview with Roy Hodgson, Freddie Ladapo and Damien Delaney following the game.
Freddie, made your debut today in the Premier League. How big a moment was that for you?
It's what I've been dreaming of since I signed for this club. That there's been ups and downs, and you know, sometimes I thought it wouldn't happen, but I'm happy it finally did.
Yeah, you probably could have had chance on deadline day to go out on loan, but did you have an eye on the striker situation that, you know, there was just Christian, so you might get a chance?
Yeah, I spoke to obviously my family and my agent, and it was like, you know, if there's still space and there's still, you know, maybe 1 or 2, then there's still competition. And, you know, if I put myself in the right state of mind and do well in the 23s like I was doing, then I could be in for a chance.
The 23s and the first team training as well, playing for the behind closed doors friendly. Got a couple of goals this week. We shouldn't tell anyone that actually because it's behind closed doors, but that's good for you, isn't it?
Yeah, to be fair, in the past 3 games, obviously I've been scoring every week, and you know, I was happy that, you know, I finally got the chance, and I'm thankful to obviously the manager and the players for, you know, helping me get there.
What do you need to do now to try and get that starting place?
I think I showed, you know, some good things today. I think I won a few balls in the air, you know, I held it up well and everything, and I spun in the channels and I caused them a few problems. So I think if I keep doing that and I keep showing against someone like Man U, obviously at the top of the table, and that's all you can do.
For the fans that haven't seen you play, how would you describe yourself as a striker?
Fast, strong, and can score a goal.
And finally, was it a special moment making the debut at a place like Old Trafford with such history?
Yeah, great club, that fantastic club. Obviously been watching them ever since I was obviously a baby, and you know, they've always been up there, so it's a massive thing for me, and I'm very happy to make my debut.
Damien, clearly a very disappointed dressing room. How difficult was the task you faced there, and how difficult is the task ahead?
Enormous, the task ahead for us, but we're aware of what's ahead of us, and it's just a case of us now understanding that our season wasn't the last 2 weeks, you know, essentially against Man City and Man United, although getting beat 5-4 isn't acceptable, but you know, we take it on the chin and we understand that we've Chelsea coming up next, and then after that we've a run of games where we need to start picking up points. So the size of the task is massive, but it's going to be enjoyable and looking forward to it, and hopefully we'll come out the right end at the end of the season.
Is this something that's got to be worked on the training ground?
Yeah, you got to believe first and foremost, you know, and really dig in. Unfortunately, we came into a run of games at the minute that was probably not ideal. You know, the opening run of games of the season, those are the results that really caught us. You know, we should have picked up more points than what we did. These 2 games today, I think the performance was awful. You know, it wasn't. You know, I've come here and played worse and got away with a 1 or 2 in defeat. If you're looking for some sort of a positive take out of it, but like I said, our season is coming up in the next 3 months.
It's too early really to talk about relegation battles, but is there a mountain to climb ahead of you, starting again with Chelsea after the break?
Yeah, it is, definitely, but it will be the first mountain that we've had to climb at this football club. We continually team to give ourselves big tasks. We've come up with the right answers over the past, and with the right amount of work and commitment, I'm sure we will again in the future. With
1 or 2 players to come back, like Sir Wilfred Zaha, how big a help will that be?
Gives you an enormous outlet. I mean, everyone knows he's one of the top players in the division, so any team that loses their main man is going to struggle for a little bit, and then losing Christian and Ruben as well on top of that. So there's a lot of attacking players out of our team at the minute, and I thought the lads put up a good showing today. We never stopped going really, we never stopped forcing the issue, but they're such a good side that you're never going to find it easier.
Just finally, what did Roy say to you when you came into the dressing room?
Just pretty much what I just said, you know, it's just that our season isn't these games, you know, we need to get our heads down, take it on the chin and focus on the upcoming games, you know.
Roy, you said yesterday there may be a bit more hurt before it gets better. I'm sure you're hurting now, but can we get your thoughts on the game?
Yeah, I mean, one hurts when one loses, and especially when you lose heavily. I thought the early goal at the start of each half was very crucial, if you like, to the fact that we conceded the 4 goals. I think had we survived that early period and not conceded the way the first half panned out, I thought that we were getting stronger. We were dealing with their threat quite well. But of course, then we did concede a second after, much later in that half, and then to concede the third one right at the start of the second half, that really gave us an incredible uphill task. So it became a question of character, a question of resilience, a question of people fighting and keeping going, because we knew, that their tails are up. They feel they can't lose. So it's hunting season for them, just to show all their party tricks and to fly forward. But I don't think, strangely enough, for the 4 goals that we were under siege to that extent. And I thought there were moments in the game, quite long spells sometimes, where we evened the game out. So that's nice to know. But the only real positive, excuse me, I would take from the game is the fans. Once again, they were fantastic, to get that level of support away from home when they're watching their team obviously being outplayed for large periods by one of the best teams in the land, and yet still they stuck with us, still they encouraged us. And I think that going forward, that's going to be possibly our major weapon.
You've got 2 weeks now international, but you haven't got too many players away on international duty. Is it going to be really handy to have so much time on the training pitch?
Yep, it is. I mean, every moment on the training pitch at the moment, I think, is valuable to us, and I think the players are responding to the work we're trying to do. But there is a lot of it, and it's going to be tough to turn this, very bad start as it is now around. But it is still, 31 games to go, and the season ends in May. And who knows? I think if this team can get its act together and we can start to defend and attack better than we're doing at the moment, then points will come, and maybe it will be some other team in our position near the end of the season.
So there you have it. Now you've heard what Roy Hodgson, Freddie Ladapo and Damien Delaney had to say after the game. That concludes this week's podcast for the game against Man United. But make sure to come back next week for my post-match review of the game against Chelsea. So thanks for listening, and remember to up the Palace!